Now, I don't know what the most important quality to achieving the best of yourself is in life. I don't know, but I can tell you what I do think. And remember, what is to think? To think basically constitutes a thought that you are having. But what constitutes a thought? A thought is made up from your experiences. It's made up from what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've lived, what you've done, and what you felt, right? So here's what I think may be the most important quality for us to achieve the best us that we can achieve, or to be masters of a particular craft. I think it's discipline. Why do I think it's discipline? Okay, fine. Have you ever watched the movie The Karate Kid? You know, Mr. Miyagi, Danielson. That movie. What is the first thing that they taught Danielson, even though what he wanted to learn was martial arts or karate? The first thing that they taught him was wax in, no, wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. And they did that for days and maybe weeks, just can't recall it per se. And in all of that, what was Mr. Miyagi trying to achieve? He was trying to achieve the lesson of teaching Daniel-san the importance of discipline and sticking and being committed to something, no matter how boring, no matter how difficult that it may be. While someone may label that as tenacity or resiliency, in this case, I call it discipline, because what they were teaching him was the ability to not give up, but to continue with a particular thing in the hope that it's gonna be fruitful, as it were. And that's just a simplified example of what discipline may constitute, or what the importance of discipline may be. Rather, let's take it back a bit to say, in fact, not back, but let's move on with the same concept of discipline to say, what have the people who are masters of their craft actually achieved? People with PhDs in a multitude of different sectors, in a multitude of different disciplines. Your neuroscientists, your astrophysicists, your medical doctors, your surgeons, your guys with PhDs even in what I studied, environmental health, right? What is the one thing that they needed to figure out for them to get to the level where they are at? The simplest thing that they needed to figure out is that if I do this long enough with a commitment that is unparalleled, I am likely to get to where I'm going to get. And what that constituted is a sequence of habits. They had to figure out what best works for them. So for me, for example, what works for me is waking up early and starting my day off early, knowing that when I've woken up early, there's a certain set of actions that I need to take for me to be in a space of productivity for the day, right? For me to be able to take on the day, and when I look back, I'm able to say, yeah, I've done the best that I could have done in the 24 hours that I've lived today. So there's that particular thing that pushes them, and it's discipline. It's discipline. They take their strength from doing one thing day after day after day. Let's take the common example of Thomas Edison, right? They say that for him to have known how the light bulb works, he had to actually fail 1,000 times. Some people say 10,000 times. I don't know how realistic that is, but discipline, right? Discipline. But I don't know how realistic that is. But let's say it is 1,000 times, and it's on that 1,000th time that finally the light bulb actually brought some light into the space, into the dark space that it was in, which was probably his laboratory. So people take that example to prove that you have to do something and do it continuously, knowing that there's a particular output that you want from all those actions. I'll give you an example in a more practical way, or in a way that speaks to the most of us, the most of my generation, the most of the younger ones, the most of the generations of old. And that's financial discipline. You know, people that are wealthy, there are people that get wealthy very quickly. They, through their ingenuity in business, and they are successful because they were able to spot a problem, then act on it. And then there are people that get wealthy over time. There are people that know that over time there's a series of things that you need to do. Let's speak now to the financial space. At the age of 21, you graduate. I'll just take the narrative of a scholar, right? So from the age of 21, you graduate, and then you start work. You're fortunate enough to get a job as early as possible. And then you start earning a salary. Now, let's use two different people. There's John and there's Peter, or Hunale Tebogo, and there's a Thabo, for just for argument's sake. And John is an individual who, they both start working at the same time. They've studied the same thing. They got similar jobs and therefore get similar salaries. But one of them pursues a life of consumption. So they are not financially disciplined enough for them to be able to save money, for them to be able to do things that are more productive with their money. Rather, they live a life of consumption. So the first thing that they do is that they buy a big car, and then they rent in a property, maybe a flat, maybe a townhouse, whatever the case may be. Then they live a lifestyle of consumption whereby there's not much money left at the end of the month, because the bulk of it also goes to entertainment. The live now mentality is what is rife in their mind, right? Then 3 years later, they change their car to a bigger car. 6 years later, they change that car to a bigger car, and so the cycle continues. And then we have a Thabo on the other hand. Thabo is a type of person who is disciplined enough to say, let me sacrifice all the joys of enjoying this money right now by actually, for example, saving up for my property. And then they buy that property almost cash. So they go to the bond, maybe they stay 5 years, but they saved up like 300,000, right? And then they buy a unit for 500,000, and therefore they're only paying towards a 200,000 bond. And then as they're staying there, they also are able enough to live within their means, save a particular percentage. They're able to read a lot of financial literacy books. They're able to share their knowledge. They go to seminars, they go to talks, they go to financial classes, and they're able to use their money in such a way that their money works for them, all through discipline. Remember that I said discipline is a series of actions that lead to a particular result, right? So all those results of saving money, of reading the books, of going to the seminars, to the workshops, to the financial literacy classes, to buying the property, waiting a bit before buying their first car, but buying it cash, or at least paying it off very quickly, and then buying a second property while renting out the other property, buying a third property, and so the cycle goes on for 20 years. That discipline will translate in Thabo being more financially wealthy versus the Tebogo who just lived for consumption. Right? So discipline is not just a narrative. Discipline should be a way of life for all of us. It should be a route that we all take in order to achieve all that it is that we want to achieve. So I want us to take discipline the way I take discipline, because as I said, it's just a thought. And I explained what a thought is, right? It's just a thought. So maybe think about it for yourself. What is the biggest quality that will take you to the level of life that you want to go, or that you want to be at? What is that quality that you need to hold fast, strengthen, build, and practice on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, and then you see that results in a decade? What is that habit that will make you the master of self? I need you guys to think about that. and then apply it as best as you can. No one is going to do it for you. I always say you are the only one that's going to be able to fulfill your own destiny. So big up to those that have already figured what is the best quality for themselves. But for the rest of us who are figuring it out still, maybe let's try discipline and let's see where it gets us. Peace out.